first diagram I introduce when I teach economics is not supply and demand. It's this diagram, and I call it the embedded economy. This is why I so like Kurt Rothschild and his idea of embeddedness in economics. We have the economy embedded in society. It is a social construct. We invented it. Embedded in the living world, drawing in material and matter, spewing out waste and pollution, bathed in a river of solar energy. So from day one of economics, we can ask the question of ecological economics. How big can the economy's through flow of energy and matter be before we disrupt the very life-supporting systems that underpin all our well-being? But also look inside the economy. It's not just the market and the state. That was a 20th century boxing match. It's also the household, where we all begin every day with the unpaid caring work of looking after ourselves, our partners, our children, our parents. And it's the commons, where we come together, not through the market or the state, but as a community, and co-create goods and services that we value. Let's put this thinking at the heart of 21st century economics and recognize that I wouldn't want to live in an economy that missed any one of those four forms of provisioning. But they work best when they work together, and we need to innovate to make them work well together. And now let's bring humanity back into the picture, because when we start economics with supply and demand, we just show up as rational economic man. We are consumer or producer. We're shopping or working, or shopping or working, or shopping or working. But when we broaden these forms of provisioning to the state and the household and the commons, suddenly all of our roles come into the sight. In relation to the state, we may be resident or public servant or voter or protester. In the household, parent, guardian, relative, child. In the commons, co-creator, sharer, repairer, and steward. And if 10 billion human beings are going to thrive together in the 21st century, I believe that we deeply need to rediscover the values and the skills that enable us to do those roles well. So I offer you one piece of advice. If you want to become a good commoner in the 21st century, if you want your children to have those skills of co-creation, sharing, repairing, and stewarding, here's my one piece of advice. Don't play Monopoly. Because Monopoly is a twisted version of a game that was actually intended to teach us everything that's wrong about extractive market capitalism. It teaches you that you win by hoarding property and extracting rent until you're the only player left in the game. If you want an alternative, because we need alternatives, I suggest you play Pandemic, which, as a doctor will love, is a collaborative game. It teaches us to collaborate as a team. We're going to rid the world of diseases so that everyone is left in the game. And when I play this game with my family and my 10-year-old twins, I'm amazed how hard we find it to collaborate. And I ask myself, where was this skill in my education? I was never taught to collaborate, to negotiate, to reach consensus. So we need these skills. So how are we going to get into the donut? I believe we need to put two principles at the heart of 21st century economics, because growth is not going to even things up again, and growth does not clean up after itself. So let me start with distributive design. I'll start with regenerative by design. Okay, so this is the linear, degenerative 20th century hosepipe economy. We take Earth's resources, we stick them in the pipe of production, we make them into things we want, we use them for a while, and then we throw them away. And this take, make, use, lose, this is what is pushing us over the planet's boundaries. We need to turn that linear, degenerative system into a circular, regenerative one. An economy in which things are never thrown away because there is no away. They're used again and again, far more carefully, far more collectively, far more slowly, so that we begin to mimic nature, who's been thriving by regenerating for 3.8 billion years. But we also need to be distributive. The 20th century was dominated by technologies and institutions that were concentrating by design. Think of 20th century energy, an oil rig, a gas pipeline, a coal mine, bringing huge cash and resources together in one place, a big investment. Think of 20th century business, a corporation, bringing value into one large entity. And here's the beautiful opportunity. This century, we have the chance and technologies to create societies that are far more distributive by design. You can have a solar panel on the roof of every home and school and hospital and parliament. We can have enterprises that don't concentrate value in the hands of a few shareholders. They share them with all employees, with all small shareholders, with crowdfunding, micro-enterprises. This, to me, is an ecosystem of a healthy economy. And think about the relationships, the jobs, the roles, the connections that need to exist to make this happen. So we have to create economies that are regenerative and distributive by design. And I look for this pattern, this ecosystem of healthy relationships, not just in the human body, but also in our societies, because this, I believe, is going to be the sign of health and success in 21st century economies. So, enough of ideas. My book first came out in 2011, and I have spent the last 2.5 years talking about these ideas, and it gives me great hope and energy that there is such interest. But there comes a point where you say, well, let's put this in practice. And I have friends who I see around the world putting ideas in practice, whether it's Sigrid Stagel creating a new department and new degrees, whether it's Christian Felber launching the economy for common good, creating the new institutions that we need to see modeling what a different economy can look like. So I gathered some people in my kitchen and started to say, let's create the Donut Economics Action Lab. It's about putting the ideas into action, and it's a lab because the economy is a complex system, so we're experimenting, exploring, and figuring out how to do this as we go. And it's great fun setting up a team in your kitchen, except when you start expanding, you can't stay there all the time. And one day, a space came free. This was last summer. A space came free in this wonderful building in Oxford, which is Oxford's only makespace. It's full of social and environmental organizations. It actually belongs to a college. It's going to be knocked down in 2 years' time, but until then, it's ours. And we're filling it with the value of all these institutions. And they said, well, you need to pay the rent. And we didn't have any funding. And then I get an email. Dear Kate Raworth, we'd like to say you've been awarded the Kurt Rothschild Prize. So that very day, I could say, I put the rent down. So thank you. It literally is this prize enabled me to say, let's rent an office, let's set up an organization. So it's a very meaningful moment and prize, money coming to just the right purpose and opportunity at just the right time. We are a small team in that building, and our aim is to put the ideas of donut economics into action with teachers, communities, businesses, and cities. Let me say briefly about each of those. Every day I get tweets and emails from teachers saying, I want to teach the donut to my students. Do you have a class? Do you have a lesson plan? We're going to work with teachers to co-create classes and videos and lessons and activities to teach 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, university students, and learn from the teachers as to what makes sense for them. I've been talking about donut economics with businesses for 7 years, and we want to turn the ideas again into workshops, into tools that companies can take away and apply themselves. So every resource that we create, we will co-create with that community, make it so it's good enough, and then give it away so that anybody can take it. And we just ask they bring back what they learned and iterated so we can keep working on it together. Cities, the C40 approached me, which is an amazing network of 90 globally ambitious cities that have committed to living their city within a world of 1.5 degrees global heating. And they said, we want to use the donut with our most ambitious cities. So we've turned it into a tool to take to those cities to look at themselves through a holistic lens. Here are our first workshops that took place in September in Portland, in Philadelphia, and in Amsterdam. And you can see these are city officials really engaged, often meeting each other for the first time, looking at their city and planning its future through a holistic lens. And then I end on communities, because something amazing happens when an idea gets into the hands of community groups, especially when it's called donut economics. Nobody is scared of it. They pick it up and they turn it into a silly pair of glasses and say, this is how I see the world when I look at the world through the lens of the donut. They turn it into a game. In Belgium, students had a weekend retreat imagining the future through the donut. Communities that have declared a climate emergency say, okay, we've declared a climate emergency, and now what? And they're using this to vision a positive future for themselves. So this is what this prize has enabled me to create a team in a building making this happen. If you're interested in joining us or finding out more about what we're doing, fill in the little form at this URL, and you will be the first to know when we launch our online platform and invite everybody to co-create these resources with us. But I also, finally, invite you to imagine putting your own life on this little table and asking yourself, how does the way that I shop and eat and travel and invest and divest and protest and volunteer and vote? How do all of these ways that I live my life and influence those around me help bring humanity into the donut? Because one thing I know, our children and our grandchildren will be deeply grateful to us that we do this. Thank you very much indeed.